Here is not a water park. Here is a water.
As we light the first candle for Advent, we'll be talking about peace. And what that means to me is when I think about Jesus and peace, I think about that the times where I screw up and I fall off track, that my parents can be mad at me, friends could be mad at me, but I know that if I put my focus back to Jesus, to the cross, he will never be mad at me, and he'll always be there, and that provides peace within me to know just that.
So, this is a water. This is
When I think of the peace of Christ, I think of a time when I was in Generations, the church I served before here, where we would pass the peace of Christ to each other. So we would stand during a service and we would say, "The peace of Christ be with you." And then somebody else would say, "And also with you." And that was great. Until a 7-year-old girl changed the entire concept of what we were doing. She stood up and she said, "May the peace of Christ be with you." So from that point forward, we walked around saying, "And the pepperoni." Or somebody said sausage or whatever they wanted to, But it was this idea, I think, for me that sort of said, it broke, the peace of Christ broke from this concept of what we see as tradition and brought us into this concept of peace. Because tradition always seems to give us legalisms and makes things a little bit harder to live by. But peace, when we're in the peace of Christ, as opposed to the pizza crust, because the pizza crust can also bring peace. The new bagel one with a little salt on it sounds good to me. I haven't had it yet, but I'll give it a shot. But it's this idea that we move from this concept of somebody getting mad at a 7-year-old girl saying, "The pizza crust be with you," and instead of "The peace of Christ be with you." We move from that to the idea that it's okay. It's her heart that matters. And it's the fact that she walked around the entire sanctuary telling everybody, "The pizza crust be with you." That changes the idea of the legalism into the grace. And I want to share what Paul writes in Galatians. But what happens when we live in God's way? We bring gifts into our lives. Much the same way as the fruit appears in the orchard, things like affection for others, exuberance about life, sincerity. We develop a willingness to stick with things, is there a feedback going on over here? Is that good? Is that better? All right. We develop a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that the basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in the loyalty of commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. Legalism is helpless in bringing this about. It only gets in the way. Along with those who belong to Christ, everything's connected. I'm sorry, I'm just having a brain seizure today. Everything connected with getting into our way and mindlessly responding to what everyone else calls necessities is killed off for the good, crucified. When we think about it, it brings about this. Tradition always leads to legalism and away from peace. Always. It always leads away from peace. Now, the title of this particular sermon is called Peace and the Green Bean Salad. Now, to give you the idea of the green bean salad is that this is not something that is in my mind at any time during the year except for around Christmas. It is so much not a part of my life that I mistakenly considered to be the green bean salad. But it's not a green bean salad. Let me explain it to you this way. It's called a green bean casserole. Right? How many of you like the green bean casserole? You are sick people. You need to, we'll set up some time, we'll counsel. I have a pastoral counseling rule. If it can't be solved in 5 sessions, I send you to a professional. So just let me know right off the bat, because green bean salad, green bean casserole, yeah, no, not good. Did you know that Del Monte, they own Campbell's, and Del Monte decided to do a survey of how many, what are the top states and how many people like green bean casserole in every state? You ready for this? And one of the things that made me the happiest when I looked at the research, I was so blessed, Nebraska didn't even make the top 20. It wasn't even in the top 20. They listed the top 20. Nebraska was in the top 20. You know what the number 1 place was? Kentucky. 78% of the people said they loved green bean casserole. When I was growing up, I had a friend who said, my mom makes the best green bean casserole ever. And I said, no, I'm not, no. And he's like, oh, no, man, she makes it from scratch. I said, whoa, what do you mean? He goes, well, she gets 2 big cans of green beans. And then she gets a can of mushroom soup, and a can of condensed milk, and a can of mushrooms, and then she mixes it all together, and she gets the can of the French fried onions and puts it on top of it. I said, dude, that's not from scratch. That's from cane. But that's where his mind was, and that was it. And I have a question for you. When you're thinking about Christmas, and you're thinking about Thanksgiving, and you're thinking about this time of year, if you walked into a house and there was no green bean casserole on the table, how many of you would be kind of depressed? Not majorly depressed, but just a little bit like, oh, dude, no green bean casserole. Right? You'd be bummed. Yeah, dude, no. I would not be bummed. I'd be like, woohoo, yeah. Yeah. But it's gotten to be such a point. It's gotten to be such a dish in our sort of repertoire of foods around the holiday that for some of us, it's just not the holiday if that green bean casserole isn't sitting on the table. Now, what is it for you? What is it for you? Around Christmas time, if you walked into a house and there was not set up before you this particular food item, what would that be that would sort of just ruin your Christmas? Anyway, ham, potatoes, candy yams, pumpkin pie, huh? Turkey, cranberry relish. You know what it is for my daughter? Lasagna. See, yeah, come. Lasagna. If she goes into a house for Christmas and there is no lasagna, it is not Christmas for her. And I always looked at myself and said, where did this come from? This is bizarre. Lasagna is not exactly high on an Irishman's table of foods. So how did this get onto hers? Well, for a few years in her early life, we lived in New Jersey while I was getting my master's. And while living in New Jersey, we would hang out with my cousin, who was Italian. So for her, she connects lasagna, because she always made a lasagna for Christmas. Other foods, but she always made a lasagna. My daughter connects lasagna to that. But you know what it is for me? You know the food that's for me? Pierogies. Pierogies. My mother was Polish, so I got pierogies. And another thing, when you said oyster stuffing? Oyster stew? How would you do that to an oyster? Sausage stuffing. Made with Italian sausage. You got sausage stuffing and pierogies, it's Christmas. I don't care whatever else you got on the table, it's Christmas, you know? Because we do that, and we define it, and we say, that is it. So that becomes our definition of Christmas. That tradition becomes our definition of the holiday. It becomes who we are. It's so much so that when it's not there, it ruins it. Now, it doesn't necessarily destroy it. It doesn't necessarily rip it apart for you. It doesn't necessarily say, well, if you don't have this on the table, I'm not going to come over. We're not celebrating Christmas. But it becomes, well, maybe some of us would. But it becomes almost a legalistic idea of what the holiday is about. It almost becomes the driving force of what that holiday is. But that's not what it's supposed to be, is it? Traditions always drive us to this point where we become so legalistic, it's insane. When I was at one of my very first churches, it was called Port Colden United Methodist Church. We had a chair that sat right in the center of the altar area. And it was an old chair that just sat there. It had no function, no one ever sat in it, no one ever did anything to it, it just sat there. So I moved it. Yeah, did I open up a can of green beans on that one? I moved the chair. Went back the next Sunday, and guess what happened? That chair was right back in that spot. It was right back. So I moved it again. Yeah, you'd have thought, okay, you get the boards, you get the nails, and let's go find this Jesus guy. Because they wanted to kill me. Chair was right back in the spot. So Port Colden was celebrating its 100th anniversary as a church. Cool. So we invited all the pastors that came from all over that had ever pastored, that were still alive, and we invited them to this big celebration. One of the very first pastors of the church, who was probably 95 if he was a day, came in and he sat down and he looked at me after the service and he said, "Still having a problem with the oil lamp?" I said, "We don't have oil lamps. We have this silly thing called electricity." And he started to laugh and he said, No. I mean, do you have a problem with the oil lamp? And I said, "No, we don't light an oil lamp." And he said, "Because there used to be an oil lamp right up there at the top, right up there at the wall, and it just would never burn. And every time we would do something, it would just go out. It would just constantly go out. I'd have to play with the wick before every service to lift it up and to make it work and everything. But, I'm short. So I put a chair there." So the chair was actually there simply so that he could light a light above so that he could do some reading. Well, we moved to electricity sometime around 1960 in this particular church. Serious. In this particular church. And so there was no need for that. But it becomes so much a part of the legalistic concept of what that church was that it could not be moved. And when it was moved, it just freaked people out. Because it wasn't their church anymore. Oh my goodness. But you moved the chair. You couldn't move. Why did you move it? Not the chair. We even tried to create ideas, and some people even tried to create ideas of why that chair was there. Because some of them didn't even remember. Some people said, well, it's the Christ chair. Really? The Christ chair. Because Jesus is going to sit in the most uncomfortable chair in the whole entire church. Under an oil lamp that doesn't work. Sure, why not? That's okay. So what is the Jesus chair? We was trying to create this theology about this chair that just became something twisted, and it was not at all where we should have been. And moving it causes more problems than you can imagine. It became so legalistic that it drove the churches somehow. How many of us have that in our lives around this time of year? Around where we are as a community of faith, as where we are as people of Christ. But the funny thing about it is this: that's not where Jesus wants you to be. See, one of the things that sort of confuses me, especially me, because I get confused pretty easy, is that during this time of the year we talk about Advent, we talk about the coming, we talk about the coming into place, the view, the being, the arrival of Jesus, and everybody always wants to go to the second coming. And they want to connect the second coming of Jesus to his birth and the first coming. Well, I'm not too worried about the second coming because I'm still working on the first coming. And I figure once I get that down, the second coming will take care of itself. So I'm going to worry about the first coming. And it's that center on this that we need to center on the birth, the advent, the arrival, the coming of Christ. But people want to connect it to the second coming or to the crucifixion. And they want to bring it in. And I'm sorry, but for me, the idea of living in the peace of Christ is understanding that how can you connect the birth of the baby to the crucifixion? 33 years in between. So let's think about the peace of Christ. As we approach this Advent season, as we approach this first Sunday of Advent, as we look to the coming of Christ, there's going to be some things that we're going to do that are going to be a little different than what you're used to. The first thing that you're going to notice is that there's no Christmas bulbs or no Christmas ornaments on the tree. Do you know why? Oh, you know because I told you yesterday. That's cheating, dude. The idea of no Christmas bulbs or no Christmas ornaments on a tree is nothing theological. There's no kind of deep spiritual meaning to it. Well, maybe there is if you think about it. You decorate the tree. Why should we have 5 people decorating the tree for everybody else? So there's bulbs over there at the end of the service. Come on up, take a bulb, put it on the tree. Make one tonight. Make one this week. Bring one next week. Have your kids make one. Bring it in. Decorate the tree. It becomes community. It becomes our tree, not my tree and not 5 people who are here decorating. It becomes everyone's tree. We're connected to that tree. Second thing you probably noticed is this wonderful piece of artwork.
No.
And you can make sure there's no comments from the peanut gallery on that.
No.
Took me a while to make. Each week we're going to have a different word up. And the word is what we're going to be talking about. Now, you can probably look at this and you probably say to yourself, yeah, I can do better than that. You're probably right. I'm a pretty creative person, but art is not exactly my forte. But at Christmas Eve service, these are going to be laid out on a table. And there's going to be more paint sitting off to the side. And what you do is you take the paint, you dip the stick in it, and you drizzle it. And then this becomes community art. And then this hangs in the church. This becomes us. This becomes who we are. So when we think about how legalism kind of binds us, we also have to think about how peace and the peace of Christ, or the pizza Christ, sets us free. And then Paul gives us those gifts. First thing I like is when Paul talks about it, he talks about it in this idea of an orchard. Now, when I read this, probably several of you said, wait a minute, isn't that the fruit of the Spirit? Yes, but this isn't the message. So it reads a little differently, and everybody always says the fruit of the Spirit is peace, patience, love, hatred, and they can list these single word concepts, but I love the way Eugene Patterson brings it out when he reimagines, not reinterprets, but he reads it from the Greek and then writes it in today's English about how we do this. And the first thing he brings out is this idea of an orchard. I love the idea of the fruit of the Spirit coming from the orchard. It starts as a flower. It gets pollinated and then slowly turns into a fruit. See, when we think about the fruit of the Spirit, with some people it's like, okay, if you accept Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior, boom. Fruit of the Spirit, where is it? Immediately we expect people to just all of a sudden have all these wonderful gifts. And what Paul is saying here is that it takes time. It's this orchard that grows. And he said, don't pollute the fruit. Similar to the idea of don't pollute green bean with all that other icky stuff. Green beans are good. Oil, salt, don't. But here's what he says. Affection for others. That's a fruit of the Spirit. Affection for others. We connect to others. We have an affection for them. We care about them. Exuberance in life. How many of you are excited about life? I am. I love living. Well, the alternative is pretty rotten, but I like being alive. I enjoy people. I enjoy sharing my affections with people. I would rather hug you than shake your hand. I like people. I like people. And that's a peace. That's a gift in the peace that comes to us. That we're in that peace of Christ, we like people. We want to get to know people, and we enjoy our lives. And it doesn't matter if we don't have enough money, or if the car doesn't work right, or if we don't have a big enough house, or whatever the case may be. It's enjoy what you have. One of the things my sister taught me very early in my walk is that if you are not content with where you are, God will never move you to the next level. Because it's in contentment that we move forward. When we're content, when we're happy with what's going on in our lives, then we move forward. A sincerity, which is an honesty, isn't it? If someone is sincere to you, then they truly mean what they're telling you. They truly mean they care. They truly mean they want to get to know you. So there's that sincerity that comes in peace. A willingness to stick things out. Now, I will admit, and Shalene will back it up 110%. I have ADD. I'll do this and then stop it halfway, and then do this and stop it halfway, and then go over here and do this and stop it halfway, and go over here and do it, stop it halfway. And there were several times in our house in California where we have a wall half finished, and we'd be half finished for 3 months because they'd be working at the yes. So he's over there going. Okay. Don't listen to her. She's just a passive wife. Leave her alone. Next one. But it's a willingness to stick things out. It's a willingness to sort of see things to the end. It's a willingness that says, if I'm going to tell you I'm going to do something for you, I'm going to do it for you. I'm not going to back away from it. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to move forward and I'm going to help you. A sincere compassion in the heart. Sincerity. There's a compassion. There's this idea that we have empathy, that we care about each other, that I worry about you, that I pray for you, that I think of you, and that if I can help you, I want to help you. A conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. One of the things that the church has done very, very well within its legalistic concept of how God works is that God works in people, but you know what? People have spirit, so God works in them, but dogs don't. Cats don't. Hamsters don't. Now, how many of you are dog people? All dogs go to heaven. They have a spirit. Animals have a spirit. There is a connection between the divine and them as there should be between us and the divine and us and them. We should care about them. My daughter was a vegetarian for a number of years. And so was I, until I realized that's exactly why God put ribs in a cow. I may be a lot of things, but dumb ain't one. Okay? But it's this idea that we want to separate God's creation from God. But God is in the creation. God is in everything. God's divinity permeates absolutely everything that we see. But we want that dualism, don't we? We want that good and that evil. We want that this and that that. We want this and we want that either or. But God says it's both things. Everybody, everything, regardless of your backgrounds, regardless of your choices, regardless of anything, that God, the divine, exists in you and exists in the world around us. We find ourselves involved, loyal. Loyal. We are loyal to each other. We are loyal to each other. I don't know about you, but I think, and I when I hear the idea of a marriage covenant, the idea of a relationship covenant, whatever you have, whatever your particular living arrangements are, that you're committed to that person at some level. When that's violated, that destroys us. There's a trust that's gone. And what Paul is saying is to live in peace, to live in the peace of Christ, that we understand that there's a strong need to be committed and loyal to each other, to our spouse, to our lover, to whoever we have, but also to each other. But also to each other. We don't need to force our way in life. But I want to say this too. I don't think it's only that we don't need to force our way in life, but we also don't need to force our definition of what life should be on others. It's the idea that people are going to live differently, and it's okay. You know, some people like to drive a VW, others like to drive a PT Cruiser. Others like to drive a Ford Escape. Others like to drive a Jeep. But wouldn't it be boring if I forced my way in my life and the way I saw things on you? Wouldn't that be just driving me crazy? How many would do it? If I said to you that everybody had to go out and buy a PT Cruiser, how many would? Where's your loyalty? The idea is that I don't force myself on you. I don't force my ideas on you, and that we don't force each other to do what it is that our life is not forced upon each other, because we're living in a relationship. We're living in commitment. We're living in that peace of Christ. We're living in that place. We're living in that place where God matters more than anything else. And then when the God matters more than anything else, love always wins. Love always wins. And it's the ability to generate an energy that moves us forward. That moves us forward. See, there has to be that crackle. There has to be that energy that exists in our hearts and in the hearts of the congregation to move us from point A to point B. Okay? And let me give you an example. You have a car, and it doesn't have gas in it. And you turn the key. Is that going to start? Somebody get rid of this electric car, please. It's an electric car, you push a button, ha, you turn it. So you turn the key and the car doesn't start. So what do? You sit back and you say, wait a minute, why isn't it starting? It should start. Well, the reason it doesn't start, it doesn't have gas. What does gas do? Gas explodes and gives it the energy to move forward. So there needs to be an energy inside us. There needs to be an excitement of what's happening. There needs to be this understanding that when we live in the peace of Christ, Christ moves inside us. Oh my goodness. That has to be the most amazing thing in the world. Because as I've said before, we're not baptized in lemon juice. We're not pickled. Christians are not pickled. We need to smile. We need to understand that, you know what? There is a God. He came to earth. He died for us. And it's cool. The Bible is a book of do's, not a book of don'ts. You know, we are defined by how we see things negatively. We should be defining how we see things positively. Because if all we're going to do is see the negative, we're going to see the negative. We see the positive, we see the positive. I love people. I love people. We should all love people. When we find that peace of Christ, we should embrace everybody. It doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter anything like that. If we start to define how we see somebody and we say, this is how this person must live, because this is what I want, then we're not understanding the message of Christ. Because here it is. Christ changes you. Christ changes me. I don't change you. Christ changes you. Our idea of our faith, the idea of Christianity, is it changes one person. You. That's it. Changes one person. You. Or me. I, in turn, share that with somebody else, and they change. They, in turn, share that with somebody else, and they change. And next thing you know, we've got this movement of people changing. You don't have to define laws to make people change. You don't have to create legalisms to make people change. Because Christ changes us. Christ changes us. When you were a kid growing up, there were probably a whole lot of rules that you couldn't do. A whole lot of things that your parents stopped you from doing. Some of them for safe reasons. Some of them for safe reasons. No, Billy, you can't run with that axe. Right? Sometimes that happens. Or, Susan, I don't necessarily would play with those matches around that gasoline. So we learn that there's certain things that are safe. But if you saw your kid with an axe and he ran, would you take him and beat him and thrash him and throw him in his room, take the axe and hide it from him and never let him touch another axe again as long as he lives? Right? But that's what we tend to do as Christians. We tend to beat people up. But when we're living in the peace of Christ, when we understand the peace of Christ, and every time I say the peace of Christ, I want to say peace of Christ. It's just always been stuck in my head ever since that little girl. But every time that we live in the peace of Christ, when we understand the peace of Christ, our hearts change, our lives change, the world around us changes. And it changes in ways that, because we change, we see the world differently. We don't see the world the same way. And in that understanding of who Christ is, in that understanding of this peace that just permeates our spirit, the idea of an orchard growing fruit. And one of the things is this, and I've seen this in my life many a time. Someone becomes a Christian at 20. It's almost guaranteed that they'll be legalistic. But if somebody who was 20 when they became Christ, and are now 80, the fruit is grown. I have seen more people in their 70s and 80s that just get it. They're not pushing, they're not argumentative, they're not fighting, but they get it. Because their fruit is grown. And their fruit is about ready to fall off the tree and plant their seed. And that's the idea of the peace of Christ. Is that as we understand it, as we live in it, it grows with us. It moves. It becomes our DNA. Let's pray. God, we just come before you and we want to live that peace. We want to understand that peace inside us. We want to open our hearts to that peace. Lord, we know that happens through the Holy Spirit. We know that happens when the Spirit descends upon us. And we just ask that happen. We ask that your Spirit work inside us so that we can live in the peace that you desire for us. And that others can see that peace in us. Through Jesus Christ we pray.